So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yirmiyahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. And during this time, then, when we begin our quest, searching the holy instructions from the Tzayelic lineage and disregarding any kind of religion, except what the Messiah has said of helping then widows and orphans, we then must realize the scriptures are plainly given, so then we can understand facts, simply facts. There is no religion with it. There is no adoration of any kind. We only receive these understandings as Galah, and becoming Galah with the instructions. So then, not only this, but for so long, for more than 1,000 years, people have made religion out of the instructions in order to benefit themselves. This is from then the time of the deceit, from 1009 to 2009, where then nations have scandalized the scriptures for their own gain. So if people they were then involved with some sort of a congregation where they can worship and adore what they believe is truly not from the scripture, the adoration or then a similitude of adoration in our modern days is simply understanding Galah and enjoying the instructions, and this truly is a form of adoration. Since then the holy city is not yet available, and the Hebrews they are not yet in position for then functioning their functions, then adoration at the moment does not exist, not in a form where for so many centuries then the nations have done so, having some sort of worship where they can introduce their own ways of laws and regulations and then mixed up with the politics. Those times are gone. So then when we read the instructions, a person first, speaking of salvation, the Messiah was very, very, very clear. He said, if you want to be saved, you must be born again. And he said this very plainly. He was simply saying, born again in the Spirit via his own sacrifice. So then later, people would be Galad. Galah means understanding the multi-layers of the holy instructions. As far as Gentiles are concerned, they are testifiers of the Messiah, known then as then testifiers. You find in sections in Ezekiel, you find in sections in Galah, you find sections then in Yirmiyahu. Those are the Gentiles then speaking on behalf of the Messiah. And Galah is then the explanation of the holy instructions via layers, so facts then are known amongst the Gentiles. So there is no religion. It's a simple fact. So then let's try to understand what then Shaliach Shaul has said in Romans 7. He said then precisely, he found a force in himself against every time his decision of becoming obedient to the instructions. Obviously the Messiah has said the evil resides in the flesh. So then no person is absent from it. Every person must confront the truth. So if a person then, without having the proper knowledge of the Hebraic scripture, and they read always then the Greco-Roman scandalized scripture because the translators were ignorant, they made many mistakes and people made a religion out of it rather than understanding the Galah, or then simply the layers, because the Messiah said not a layer is going to be left undone. So then what's going on in the world then? You find many nations then being acquainted with the holy instructions, understanding the time of deceit had ended in 2009. So then They are becoming more aware of the holy instructions. However, the Messiah said, not only being then hearers of the word, but doers of the word. If a person simply hears the word, and then because of their own convenience they have a relationship with the word in a certain form, then they want to get galad and react in another form, then the Messiah said you can't serve them both. You have to have a consistency of what you do at work or when you relate yourself with the world, yet being the example via galad to the others. So let's understand where we are at as far as politics of the world. We have already known very easily then the multi-layers regarding then the ending of the 1,000 years of deceit. During the time of the 1,000 years of deceit, people did what they wanted. Then nations did what they wanted. If they were then involved with wars, they could take over the other country, and then they would take over each other. They would try to get ahead of somebody else. But then, as during this time of the end, this crucial time prior of the autumn feast was similarly tried in the past. So let's understand what then Shaliach Shaul mentioned. Let's understand then what the Messiah has said. Let's understand what then Daniel has said, and then Ezekiel, and then Yirmiyahu and Yeshayahu. Because during their times, what we are experiencing today was already tried. This means projection. Projection means the situations were tried before. So when we read then the holy instructions, most principally, you find then Daniel the 11th chapter, you find precisely step-by-step relationship amongst those nations who are involved with the time of the restoration period, Gentile level. So then, let's understand the lack of instructions, so people then that expect only being positively thinking won't change the world. So let's try to understand then from Daniel 11, then Daniel 10, Daniel 9, those areas. We find in the kingdom of the East, China, kingdom of the North, Soviet Union, and kingdom of the South, then Africa. These are the designers. And their examples then we find then being related with then the covenant, meaning those Hebrews who are yet mixed up with the first tabernacle service, plus then the vision spoken of in Daniel 11 is simply the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries, meaning then the cities of the Messiah are returning. Then you find the despised one. This truly is the nation of the United States. So then later we are going to find then the relationship of these countries, and then the movement of armies, and also the politics of the time related with the extension. Let's try to understand the word extension. Truly per the instructions, then 2009 ended the 1,000 years of deceit, started in the time of the restoration period. There is, however, a time of the transition. This transition, however, must not take forever. People are becoming more aware of the times and the seasons because Shaliach Shaul said precisely then the times and the seasons they should be not ignorant of. And people are realizing, they were studying scandalized instructions where then people they did not know how to translate them, and they generated religion out of areas where it only belongs facts. So then, since facts, there is no religion in them. Let's understand then where we stand, because as far as we can understand, what's going on then with the United States? Very simply, you find then a couple of beasts then in Galah or Revelation. The first beast, you find then a leader of the trade and religion of the time. So, for instance, it's not a term that's very bad. It's not a bad term. Simply, it is a fact of during the 1,000 years of deceit, a nation led the world for 800, the other nation led for a couple hundred. And then the first 800 was obviously the Great Britain. But they were not only bad, they simply were given then the task of leading for the 800 years. The United States came around and they led for 200 years. But now we are during the time where then United States is trying to extend this time of 200, and it won't work. The king of Babylon tried to extend his time by building a huge statue where then he thought if people would bow down to this statue entirely of gold, then he would extend his kingdom forever. Wasn't true. He couldn't do it, and he didn't do it, and it wasn't done. He didn't do it, the fact he was not there prepared to take the extension because it didn't take place. So then, we find in the United States, what is going on then, for instance, in March of this year? The nations, they went to China, and they came out of there with a plan of going against China. Didn't work. Then came the G20, and then these very stupid situation regarding then the exchange of Syrian conflict versus then generating jobs. The G20 was specific regarding generation of jobs and then promoting transparency amongst the governments. Not much was done. The United States then decided to wait until the 10 plus 4 chemical bombs were exploded until prior of the G20. Then the United States came with this plan of the Syrian conflict. It was a simple detour from the main plan of generating jobs. So then what is going on? Then the President of the United States is going then to pay a visit into the Asian countries. He's simply trying then to entice war. That's the main plan, because they want to have arms sold. Since the economy is not improving, United States does not know truly how to generate jobs, so then they are going around trying to entice war. In the China Daily News today came out an article regarding then the Philippines then provoking China. They are having some very strong skirmishes where China told them to stop their skirmishes. Then you find United States coming over to the Asians, and then they are going to visit the Philippines. So the objective of the U.S. at the moment is generating conflict and tension amongst the Asian countries. They can absolutely write it down because it's true. So then, this is showing us the trying again of extending those times of 200 years granted, but those times are gone. So another push of the United States, it won't work. Absolutely won't work. China must take on the lead, and as per the instructions, as we read then Daniel the 11th chapter, we find then a relationship of the Congo with China, the Kingdom of the South. What do you think of Kingdom of the South? At the moment, the BRICS system is the new system of the future, the new trade system of the future led by China, obviously. So then, not only this, but then what constitutes then the Southern Kingdom? The riches of Congo. It's very obvious, because we are speaking a relationship of Daniel as a tradesperson and not a prophet. Though he spoke of the covenant, but the covenant section of the content of Daniel 11 is a negative term. It is used, the word covenant, speaking of vision, is positive. Speaking of the covenant as later joined up with the U.S. is for the purposes of trying then to build a third temple. And it won't take place. When the Messiah said not a stone is going to be left upon another, he was absolutely eliminating the temple. What is going to be on Mount Moriah at some point is only the tabernacling of the desert, as prescribed by Moshe. It came from heaven. So then, we understand then the plan of the future. We know what to expect. We know the United States is trying desperately to get their plans going, to get more tensions and more wars, to get their arms sold. But it won't be able to do it. They can't do this anymore. So then, what can we expect? At some point, the retrieving of the United States and rebuilding their own country. And then later coming up as a worthy partner, and then linking up with the system of the Chinese. or then the Asian market, because the Asian market was absolutely involved back in the early days with Shaliach Shaul. Obviously, he was given then many of the teachings of the trade of the new world, when the world would be obviously rebuild the kind of trade they should have it themselves. And they adopted those principles and they began to prosper. But this does not change the objective. And the objective at the moment is making sure the Chinese and the Asian market is worldwide. This truly is the main objective. At the moment we are in Daniel. Daniel, then, the first early chapters, you find then the first objective is then Mr. Kabila making a deal with then Mr. Xi. Then the southern kingdom would become strong. So then this precise prophecy relates with our time. At the moment, we know that the Syrian crisis came to nothing. We understand there won't be any kind of a strikes because Syrian government is obviously joining up with forces and giving away those dangerous weapons of chemical nature. And then, rather than the president of US then understanding the instructions, he's trying to go to the Pacific again. And in another time it won't work. Until he realized his focus must be on Africa. And the precise place is then Congo. Congo is the most important country in Africa because of the vast riches related with the technological times. What is technology? Is trade, virtual trade, internet trade. These are trades then the system is generating at the moment, and later coltan, for instance, used vastly in miniaturization of components. It is the utmost importance, so then they can produce computers. So then let's read then Daniel. Daniel is very important. He was a prophet. Mostly he was a tradesperson. What can we understand of Daniel the 11th chapter? You find then a takanot, and it must be then eliminated, so then we can read the instructions properly. So then, understandably, on the 4th verse, then you find precisely where we are at the very end of it, and then the starting point of the 5th chapter. So then the southern kingdom shall be strong. And the only reason for this prophecy is because of China. China must make a deal with Congo. It must be done, and as fast as they can. The more the instructions are then respected, the more we lean towards the obedience, the more the world enjoys then peace for a time and then harmony. So then, let's try to understand why then Mr. Xi should have a relationship with Mr. Kabila in Congo. What is the objective? Very simply, let's first start with Daniel 11. Then he was talking, and obviously Daniel mentioned, because he wrote it, there was during the time of the Darius the Mede, and then gives a time, and then those kingdoms, meaning then kingdom of the East, North, and South, China, Soviet Union, and then Africa. But then he explains, then there is a fourth understanding of the previous kingdom regarding then the legs of iron, meaning Rome. They would have some sort of aspect from this time of the legs of iron, would have characteristics upon those kingdoms. So then, the formation of these simply means then those kingdoms would have riches similar as then the fourth kingdom. Because then when we read the statue of Daniel, the 2nd chapter, the legs of iron obviously is Rome. And we understand they were very rich. So the riches, when we understand from the fourth kingdom, is then in a similitude way then taking place while these kingdoms are at play. Then moving on, explaining then in Persia, where then would have then a mighty king then expects the understanding to come from the time of Daniel. So then, during his time, there is a set ways of those events, then we projected them on the future. Because these trines or these relations that Daniel had is simply projected our future. That's what is projected. But then we must understand another section. It then explains the kingdom of the east shall be a mighty king. Mighty king, obviously the kingdom of China would be Mr. Qi. Very simply. Because we simply substitute those names and locations there was during the time of Daniel. We projected the events except then the names and the locations, obviously. Then it states, he then shall rule with a great authority and do as per his wish. And no one shall stand against him, or no one would be able then to get these broken. However, the understanding is, in Hebrew then there is a place over there, there is a space, but then he shall be broken. It's not broken. Broken in the language of the Hebrew, because they have the 5 senses translation and no abstracts. The broken is not broken but extended. The understanding of Hebrew for the word broken in Daniel 11 is not truly broken but extended. So extends then further, and then the division is truly not division, but it's simply an extension where then there are ramifications of these extensions that goes to other places. Then these ramifications then will be throughout the world on the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, but there is not a relation with then tabernacling in future events when the new earth then is established. Because the focus of Daniel is what? Making sure that chapter 11 then of Daniel then points to the autumn feast. So then the new world then is obviously given to his people. Then, not even after his own works. For he ruled, because it's not of the great work of this king that's going to be then given the new earth when it is then refurbished. For this kingdom shall be given to the others besides these. So he complements those nations where those ramifications are at and becoming part of. Then the kingdom of the south shall be strong. So this is where we are at. Precisely then the 5th chapter, not, but then the 5th verse and the 4th and 5th verses of chapter 11. This is where we are at. So then the kingdom of the south shall be strong. Since the main mention in the topic and objective is then the kingship of China, there is only a relation in a relation only. Must have a relationship with Mr. Kabila and Mr. Qi. Otherwise, then the world won't finish. And since the world must finish, at some point, Mr. Qi must make a deal with Mr. Kabila. Because later then, the Soviets, they come down and they put an end to the war over there for some time, and there are more relationships later where then the countries involved with the Congo, they will be then categorized in another area and so on and so forth. But then the most important objective is then the 4th and 5th verses of Daniel 11. So the focus is not United States. The focus is not only China. The focus at the moment is a relationship directly with Mr. Qi and Mr. Kabila. That's where we stand. If we want a second objective from Daniel 11, then we must wait for these relationships to take place. As we find already many areas of the Chinese economy already lining up with the sons of Ishmael, with Arabs. Very important. But this relationship is then securing a place for the very far future yet, within the time of roughly 20 years ahead, minus 490 regarding the autumn feast. So then, this first objective must be there, Mr. Chi, Mr. Kabila, making a deal. Then the scriptures are then in line with the world's events. So then until then, what we can do is then do our utmost, and those countries related with the BRICS must do their part in generating more jobs, making sure the initiation of the new system is then in place and in line with the instructions, so then the world can develop. Otherwise it won't. And as far as the United States trying to extend its influence, it won't work. Didn't work in March, didn't work in September, and it won't work. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.